Welcome, guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, we're going to talk money. So, we're going to talk everything money related within our business. And we're really going to be focusing on sort of the biggest and most important pieces of that. And that is going to be pricing, payment structures, billing cycles, all the stuff really related to how we're going to get you focused on bulking up your bank account. Okay. So, Last last time, what we talked about was limiting beliefs, and there was one that we hit on specifically that is directly, again, related to money, and that was all around charging more. And a lot of people at least in the example that we talked about last time was people are afraid to charge more. They don't believe they can charge more. They don't believe they're worth more. Whatever the wording is directly around how you phrase that to yourself and how you believe that to be, it's really about taking yourself outside of that line of thinking and realizing that of course you're worth more than that. You know that, but really just trying and breaking that belief and believing that you're worth more and therefore asking and charging more. And once you've done that, you will then shift the way that you look back at the amount that you were charging before. So the example that we talked about was if you're charging $30 an hour, and we use personal training as that example, you're charging $30 an hour. If you want to get to a place where you're charging $100 an hour, that's a big jump. And you may not believe right off the bat that you can actually charge that. But the reality is you absolutely can. And we'll break down the reasons of why you can and the pros and cons, and mostly the pros of what happens when you do charge more. But the limiting belief is because we haven't actually charged anybody $100 an hour, nobody's going to pay that. So once we actually do start charging people $100 an hour and they start paying it, we then start to realize that, oh, maybe this actually can be a thing. And then fast forward a few months, you'll look back on what you were originally charging, which in this particular case is that $30 an hour. And you won't even be able to believe that you were only charging that at one point. So again, the way that we shift these limiting beliefs, you can check out the last video that we did here to speak specifically about that. But once we dive in a little further to talk about pricing, we're going to start to see, like I said, the benefits of why it's actually going to be more beneficial here for everybody involved when we shift our pricing models a little bit. So now that we've broken that belief and we talked at length before about that, I want us to focus a little bit more on the specifics of what you should and can charge. So there's a couple main topics that are going to be important for us to dissect and discuss in a little bit more detail. And the first one is going to be, how do most gym owners typically figure out their pricing? What does that pricing look like? What is the average across the industry? And of course, here what we're talking about is micro gyms, small gyms, boutique gyms, whatever you want to call that, whatever phrase you want to use. But where does that pricing come from? How do we get to the numbers that we're at? So we're going to take a look at what that industry average is, and then we want to sort of dissect a little bit more about how most gym owners come to their pricing. Again, what we'll do is we'll weigh that out about the reasons why that may not be the best decision for us financially. Then I want to take a little deeper dive in looking at the differences between what happens when you increase prices or if you decrease prices, because there are different trains of thought here around what we might get if we do one of those. So there's an expected outcome that we might get if we increase prices. There's an expected outcome that we might get if we decrease prices. And again, this sort of falls in line with what those limiting beliefs are that we have. And I'm going to break that for you, and I'm going to give you maybe just a different way, a different perspective on what is actually going to transpire when those numbers change and when you either increase or decrease prices, what is actually going to happen. Last but not least, what we're going to do is we're going to look into the actual pricing and the billing cycles. So, what should you be charging and for what specifically? And how often should you be billing your clients? So, those two are obviously going to be the biggest action items that you can take out of this. So once we go through all that and we talk about specifically now, what should you be charging? And you may already be charging this. And if you are, that's great. You're a huge step ahead of where honestly most of the industry is. So that's great. Now, the billing cycles then follow up with we know what we're going to charge. Now let's look at how often we're going to be billing and charging our clients. Because again, that's something that can drastically sway what that revenue looks like on your books. So you can actually change what that revenue looks like based on how often you're charging your client. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. Now, let's rewind. Let's look at the first thing that I mentioned here and where does the pricing structure come from? Where do we as small gym owners usually get our numbers? How do we come to this conclusion of what we think we should charge and what we think is the right number, and really what obviously we think is a good number that makes sense for us, but a good number that makes some form of sense for the clients. And realistically, when we're starting, we're trying to pick a number that we think is reasonable that somebody's actually going to be willing to pay. So we are very much at the beginning afraid of charging too much because the last thing we want to do is open up a gym after we've spent X amount of money to open it and have nobody come and nobody sign up and nobody willing to pay. Now, there are other elements of that. And of course, once we start charging more, it's more important for us to have a really solid sales process in place because then we can actually start to strategically justify and sell properly and use our tactical skills to actually get more money out of people. Now, of course, on the back end of that is we have to deliver. We can't just take higher higher lump sums of money and not deliver a solid product. But again, we can't just expect to charge 10 times the price and not be able to deliver on the back end. So it's very important for us, of course, to do that. And we'll cover that in a later video. We're not going to touch on that today. Specifically today, we just want to look at where does this number come from? I like to call this rubbernecking. I think we've all experienced traveling down the highway and all of a sudden you hit traffic, dead stop. Whether it's you're now going 5 miles an hour, 5 kilometers an hour, you're going extremely slowly, you're on a highway, you should be traveling at pretty high speeds, but all of a sudden you've hit gridlock traffic, bumper to bumper, you're not going anywhere. And you're sitting in this for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Really frustrating, obviously, but trying to figure out why is this happening? Why are we having this slowdown? As we approach, we start to realize that we are slowed down because of an accident that's happened on the other side of the highway. The reason we are slowed down is because we are rubbernecking. We're looking to our left and we're trying to see what's happened over there, which has completely taken us off of our current path, or at least in this case, it slowed us down. So it's altered our current path. So the reason I call this rubbernecking is because the reason that most gym owners are rubbernecking, and what I mean by rubbernecking, at least in this context, is the way that most gym owners are getting their pricing is by looking around at everybody else and seeing what everybody else is charging and making their decisions based on that. So they're making their decisions now based on everybody else and what everybody else is doing. Now, there's a few problems with this. The first one to help shed some light on this is when we look at everybody else, first of all we get to see is that outside looking in. So we are not inside of their business and we don't know the inner workings of their business. We don't know the back end of their business and what that actual profit, if any, looks like. So for context here, the cost of an average small boutique gym is $120 a month. So what's going to happen quite often is gym owners, new gym owners in particular, are going to look around and they're going to see, let's say 5, 6, 10, 15 gyms, whatever the number may be, and they'll see what everybody's charging. Okay, 150, 120, 180. Oh, this person's charging 220, 100. They're going to get that information. They're going to tally up those totals and they're going to figure out where in that bunch that they want to fall. Commonly, when we're making this decision, an uneducated decision about where our pricing should land, we are going to shoot low and aim towards the bottom, if not the very bottom. And that is the first huge mistake that most gym owners make. So we are now taking data points from a different from a grouping of other companies where we have no idea what their actual profit is. So if we are looking externally at everything that they are doing as a business and we don't know if that's even making them money or they're even profitable, why are we making our decisions based on what they're doing? Because the outcome that they have is not the outcome that we want. If we look at 10 gyms and their pricing, and all 10 of those gyms, or even 80% of those gyms, are in financial trouble, I don't think you want to be in financial trouble, do you? Of course not. So why make our decisions based on them? Makes sense, right? So that is a huge place where from the beginning, we're thrown off course. We're following suit to what everybody else is doing, making our decisions based off of them, and it's kicking us off in the wrong direction here. So we're trying to be competitive, but what we're actually doing is we're selling ourselves out of business. Okay. So $120 a month is that average of where everybody is falling, which is substantially lower than where we all want to be. So if we continue to look at what everybody else is doing, we're going to continue to make these decisions incorrectly. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to stop looking around. Also, not to mention, there is so much competition in our space already. If we commoditize ourselves even more by making ourselves just like everybody else, it's just another reason why we're not going to make the progress that we want to make. We're not going to become financially lucrative or even viable long term. So we don't want to commoditize ourselves. We need to really separate ourselves from the pack. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk pricing specifically about how you should charge and where you should price yourself and the breakdown that is going to really leave you with the best results for yourself as a business and your clients. So what I want to touch on before we dive too much into the specifics of what to charge and how to bill, let's look at the differences between increasing your prices versus decreasing your prices. So let's start with decreasing. So the thought process behind decreasing your prices is that if we sell our memberships for less, we can get a higher volume of people. And a higher volume will allow us to sell more. It'll be easier to sell. And therefore, we'll be able to make more money. And in theory, that sounds great. But the reality is, it just doesn't work that way, especially because we will never be able to compete with the Planet Fitnesses of the world and the Gold's gyms and those big box fitness centers that have their business model entirely circled around volume. We just we can't compete with them. They're on a different scale. They have an entirely different business model. They have an entirely different facility structure. They have an entirely different financial backing, and that's just not the field that we are playing on. So we need to separate from that. The other really, really important thing to remember here is those facilities, because they are lower ticket, they sell volume because the majority of their members, an overwhelming majority of their members, over 90% of their members, don't actually show up. They show up once or less per month. And that's not the business we're in either. Like I said, our business model is completely different. We thrive off of people actually showing up and getting results. Those other businesses, the Planet Fitnesses, the Gold's Gyms, the LA Fitnesses, they make money off of people not showing up. So again, we can't look to play their game because we will lose every time. So again, let's put the volume game aside because that's not the game we want to play. So what happens when we start to charge less And we can see this in what I just said. If they are having their members, they're charging less, they have their members attending once or less per month. Would it be safe to say that their members are valuing what they offer, or in this case, what the member themselves is purchasing less? I think that's a fair assumption to make. So people are valuing it less because they're paying less. So it means it's less important to them. Okay. So we're not playing the volume game. So let's get that out of our heads. When people pay less, they value the service less because they're not invested. Now, the last thing that's important to really think about is that's what we just talked about is the customer side of things. Okay, so that's how the customer is going to look at this. But for us, if we're charging less money, we're not able to over deliver or provide an amazing product or service to the client themselves. So now we're caught in this trap. We're trying to get higher volume, but we can't because we can't compete at the level of the big box gyms. So instead, what we're doing is we're now stuck not being able to provide the proper service, the proper level of service, because we're not actually making enough money off of each individual. So everybody in this case of charging less money actually loses. They don't care as much. We can't get the volume to justify it because we don't have the facility to back it up, at least to compare at that level. And realistically speaking, because of the capital behind those businesses versus what we have, we just actually can't offer the same things that they can. So if we're making less per money, if we are making less money per client, again, we're not able to deliver that experience that they actually need. So let's look at the flip side of this now. Okay. So let's look at what happens when we actually decide to increase our prices. So when we increase our prices, essentially the opposite of everything that I just said happens. We don't need to focus on volume, which means we don't need to focus on filling our gym with as many bodies as possible. We need to focus on filling our gym with the right people who are focused on getting the results and who are actually invested. So when we charge more, people value it more because they are paying more. So if people are paying more and they're actually invested, guess what's going to happen? They're going to train more and they're going to get better results. And then what happens when you get better results? You start to tell everybody. Or the other thing that happens when people start getting amazing results is that everybody starts to notice. And when everybody starts to notice, they start to talk about it. And then who do you think they're going to come to because they see the amazing results that Jane got after just 6 weeks or 12 weeks or 3 months, whatever it is? They're going to want to be exactly where Jane is. They're going to want that same transformation and they're going to come to you. So it creates this amazing organic referral play because of the results that people are getting. If nobody, again, if we are decreasing our prices and nobody's coming to the gym, that also means nobody's talking about you. And that's not good for business either. So again, when we looked at the sort of inverse of everything that happens from decreasing to increasing, the last one that I didn't touch on, which is again a given based on what we said when prices decrease, is now when prices increase, you are able to actually provide an amazing service because now you're making money. And let's remember, we all got into this industry and we all decided to open our gyms because, of course, we love to help people and we want to see people make changes in their life, long lasting, sustainable change that makes a difference in their life and the lives of everybody around them. But we also need to make money. This is a business. And the reality is, you need to be selfish here because if you're not selfish and you don't make money, you're not going to be able to help anybody because you won't be able to pay your rent. You won't be able to keep the lights on. You won't be able to pay your staff. You won't be able to pay yourself, and your gym will close. And that's the harsh reality. The reality that nobody wants to face is that the money will run out, your gym will close, and you won't be able to help people, which is exactly what you set out to do in the beginning. So even if your primary focus, and I imagine for 99% of people who open up smaller boutique gyms, it is their focus. They want to help people. And that's amazing. That's going to that's going to pay dividends in the way you are able to grow your business and sell to your prospects. And that is going to fuel you and continue to motivate you until the end of time. But if you don't make money, if you don't prioritize the business side of it, the health of the business and making money and putting money in your bank account, you will not be able to reinvest in the business. You will not be able to live the life you want to live. You won't be able to actually provide a good enough service to get people those results that you say you want to get them, because you just won't be able to afford it. So it's really, really important that we put our business hats on and focus on making money. Because when we make money, we're able to do all of the other amazing things that we want to actually do in our business. So, yes, getting more personal with your customer is how you turn a process into an experience. Very, very well said. So, again, I want you to think about it this way. Let's reframe the way that we're looking at this. Let's say that we have two clients. Okay. Client number one, Jane Doe. Both clients, Jane Doe and John Doe, are paying for a month of service with you. They're paying for a month-long membership. Jane Doe pays $5. John Doe pays $500. They're getting the exact same thing. Let's say that we are delivering them exactly the same service. Who do you think is going to get better results? Obviously, John Doe, in this case, who's paying $500. Like we said, he is so much more invested. He is so much more invested, both financially and emotionally, because $500 is a lot of money. And for the sake of this example, we're going to say that the value of that money is exactly the same for both people. So again, like I said, if your intention is to help people, your grander goal is to help more people as much as you possibly can, charging more money is going to do exactly that. Right? We invest in the things that we care about. People who pay attention, right? All of these cliches are cliches for a reason, because they're true. So it's really important for us to focus on increasing our prices, because everybody will win. You'll win and your clients will win big. Okay? So now we've gone through two of the biggest topics for the day, right? Two of the three. Okay? So how we got to our pricing, which was looking around at everybody else, seeing what they were doing, and typically pricing ourselves a little bit lower. And we know now why that's broken. That's a broken model that we can't follow, because the majority of the businesses that we are now basing our pricing decision off of probably aren't doing well financially. So we don't want to be like them. So we have to stop thinking like them, and we can't make our decisions based on them. Okay. Number two is what happens when we increase our prices versus decreasing our prices, right? The common thought process here with decreasing our prices is, oh, it'll be easier to sell. It's just going to get us more volume. Like, that'll be no problem. If there's one big takeaway I can give you here, it is not more difficult to sell somebody something more expensive. In a lot of cases, it's actually harder to make a lower ticket sale. To go for a sale that is less money is actually more difficult than going for a sale that has a higher total. Okay. Let that sink in. If you're charging somebody $200, it might actually be easier to sell something that's $800. Okay. Trust me, I've tried both. I can guarantee you that the larger ticket sale is going to be easier. One thing's for certain, it's definitely not going to be harder. And at the end of the day, if you are spending your hard earned time, you might as well ask for more money at the end of that sale. Right? We want to focus on getting you more money. And again, like we talked about, the clients are going to be more invested when they're paying that money. Okay. Last up, let's go through. I'm going to share my screen here. So I'm going to give you guys some visuals. We're going to talk about pricing and billing structures. Okay. So these are going to be two really key things for us to focus on. These are going to be the action items for you coming out of this. And if you're just listening to this instead of watching it, you'll be able to follow along. Otherwise, this video is available in our Facebook group, and it's going to be helpful to have these visuals. They'll help out. Okay. So let me share my screen with you guys real quick. You can take a look and I'll walk you through exactly what this is going to look like. Okay. So a little bit of this is going to be review from some of the things that I just touched on a few minutes ago, but let's look at the inflow and outflow here of some billing cycles and then also our payroll and how we actually pay our clients. So the frequency there, right? So there's two sets of frequencies happening. There's how often we're paying people and how often we're getting paid, right? So how often do your clients pay you? So like I said about 10 minutes ago, the average boutique gym is charging their clients about 120 bucks a month. Okay. And that's one fixed payment per month. So 120 over the course of a month, every month. Now let's look at how often we pay our staff. Most gyms, most businesses in general, but that also applies to gyms here, pay their staff every 14 days. Okay. Now, if you're doing that, then you're actually going, let's say you follow or you meet both of these criteria. You are getting paid by your clients once a month and you pay your staff once every 14 days. You're going to be out of pocket an entire month's worth of pay to your staff at the end of the year. I'll explain that, but let that sink in again. What that means is you're paying your staff an entire extra billing cycle, an entire month. In this case, it would actually be 2 billing cycles because they're every 14 days. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So here's what's happening. Okay. Every 14 days. Sorry, you've got the 1 extra billing cycle, not the 2. So you've got your clients being billed once every month. So we've got the numbers right across the top, 1 to 12. They're paying you once a month for 12 months. That's 12 payments. Now you may look at that and be like, there aren't 13 months in the year, so this doesn't make any sense. But that's wrong. It does make sense, and I'll explain exactly why. So the common misconception here is that there are 4 weeks in every month. But we know that's not true. Some months have 30 days, some months have 31. Sometimes we notice that weird months have 5 weeks and others have 4.5. Well, what does that all mean, right? Aren't months all the same? No, they're not. The reality here is that there are 4.3 weeks in every month. So when we average out the amount of days over the course of the year and the weeks, there are actually 4.3 weeks in every single month. So that creates a discrepancy here, right? Between the amount we are paying versus the amount that we're collected when we compare our client billing cycles to our payroll. So what happens is we collect 12 cycles, we collect 12 payments, and we pay out 13 months worth of payments, right? So leaving 1 month where we're fully out of pocket. Okay. So there's a way out of this. If you are stuck in this trap, if you are stuck in this position, that's okay. There's a way out, and I'm going to show you what that way is. So again, the easiest example of thinking about this is think about a month that has 31 days and then look at February. February has 28 days. February is bang on 4 weeks. But if we look at, let's say, a month like January, January is 31. So if somebody's paying monthly, well, they're getting extra days, but they're paying the same price. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You're right. It doesn't make any sense. And when we look at that, we zoom in and we look at that, it doesn't feel like much, right? It's only a couple of days. That's not a big deal. But when you look at what is on the screen here, there's an entire month's worth that it adds up over the course of the year. So that's a lot of money being left on the table. Okay. Let's take a jump here into pricing. So we've talked about the billing cycles and the differential there, and we'll dive back into that, but I want to touch first on the pricing specifically. So there's essentially 3 different types of pricing that we're going to look at here. Okay. So we've got large group, we've got small group, and then we've got a hybrid program here, which combines large group training and your online training. Okay. So when we look at large group training, we're talking about the big classes. We've got our boot camp classes, we've got yoga classes, we've got team training classes, whatever wrapper that you have around that, that's our large group. And typically large group is 16 people or more. Small group is going to be 4 people to 1 coach. Very small, very tight knit. It's that hybrid program between personal training and your large group. Now, personal training is left off of this chart entirely because we're just focusing on group training. What we have listed here as the hybrid model, also known as accountability programs or things of that nature. Again, whatever you decide that you want to package that as, that's fine. But the key here is that you are combining in-group training, or excuse me, in-person group training, and a form of accountability coaching with one of your coaches. And again, we'll dive into more specifically about what that looks like, but that is the bread and butter program where you're going to be able to make the most amount of money and scale. Okay, so let's look at large group, for example, just for the sake of this conversation, because it's the most common thing that people have. Pricing, what we want to look at is somewhere between that $39 and $69 a week range. Now, you may be saying, Justin, this is crazy. We were just looking at $120 a month, and now you want us to go up as high as $70 a week? Yes, that's correct. Anywhere between your $39 and $69 or $40 and $70 a week. Correct. Okay, let's move on. So what we're going to do here is I want to just, for the simplicity of this math, I want to show you the difference again, and we're going to look at the industry averages, and we're going to work with that $120 a month number. So the $120 a month figure was the average, right? So again, when we speak to clients and we speak to people in general, they typically are just going to say, yeah, there's 4 weeks in every month. That's the way that people think. That's the psychology behind the way that people associate their payments and the structure in which they pay for things on a monthly basis. Okay, so let's use that math. So let's say we change nothing except for the frequency in which we bill. So let's say we go from $120 a month, which 120 times 12 is $1,440. Okay, so we've got $1,440 is that value of that entire year term. Let's say we operate with the fact that there are 4 weeks in every month, which is that, blanket statement that most people believe. And let's take 120 and divide that by 4. So that now becomes $30 a week. So now the only thing we're changing here is instead of our 12 billing cycles, we're going to charge $30 every single week. Okay. Now look at the difference. So we've changed nothing in our actual price, technically speaking, but we've just changed the billing cycle. So 30 times 52 is now 1560. So by changing nothing except for our billing cycle, we have changed the amount of revenue that we're bringing in. And if you do the math, that is an extra month of money. So just by changing our billing cycle there and not even touching our price, we have collected an extra month's worth of billing cycles an extra month's worth of revenue. And that's the 13th month. Okay. So now let's look at, and we're going to look at the math and how this breaks down with the numbers on the low end of the spectrum. So when I say low, it was based off of what we looked at previously, which was the the $40 on the low end side of things here. Okay, for your large group. So let's say we're charging $40 a week for our large group. Now there's options. So the monthly, which is grayed out in the bottom here, that's what we don't want to do. We're pushing that aside. Okay. So for comparison's sake, that's still listed there. Let's say we were charging now, instead of $120 a month, we're charging $160 a month. So 12 billing cycles at $160 a month gives us $1,920. So at least our year term value has gone up, but not as much as it possibly could. So there's 3 other ways in which we can bill on a frequency scale. So we can either bill every 7 days, we can bill every 14 days, or we can bill every 28 days. Now, the end result of what we're going to collect over the course of the year is exactly the same. We're now going to, instead of $1,920, we're going to collect $2,080. The difference here is how many cycles we're actually going to have. If we bill every 7 days, we're going to be billing $40 every 7 days, and we're going to have 52 billing cycles. And we'll talk about the differences here specifically and which one I recommend you do and the pros and cons, and we'll get there. We'll get there. Just wait. Now, if we bill every 14 days, of course, that's gone up from 40 to 80. So now every 2 weeks, every 14 days, we're billing 80, and we've cut the cycles in half. So now we only have 26 billing cycles. But again, the total is exactly the same. And now, if we decide that we want to bill every 28 days, we've gone up to $160 per 28 days, and there's going to be 13 total billing cycles. Regardless of whatever you pick one of these 3 options above the monthly, because there is a month's worth of revenue just sitting on the table, and it's money you are not collecting if you don't do this. All right. Now, which of the two, which one or two would I recommend most out of these three? And personally, in my gyms, we bill every 7 days. What I would recommend is you either do every 7 days or you do every 28 days. Now, a big thing for you to keep in mind here is regardless, if you do 7 days, 14 days, or 28 days, one thing I will say to you is you're going to sell it exactly the same way. You're going to sell it as it's only $40 a week. We just bill every 28 days. Or it's $40 a week and we bill you every 2 weeks. That's it. You're not going to say, and it's only $160 every 28 days. We're not going to package it that way. We're going to package the price as a weekly price that we just happen to bill on X date or every X days. Or in the case that you do select 7 days, you're going to say it's just $40 a week. End of statement. Okay. Now, a couple of reasons. Let's look at why I've selected as my recommendations to either go every 7 days and every 28 days. And I'll give you, like I said, the reason that I do 7 days and the big factor here of which I would either guide you down the 7-day path or the 28-day path. So let's look at the every 7 days, the pros and cons of every 7 days. Pro, it's an easy number to digest. It's only $40 a week. Number two, it's easy to sell. Okay. The downside here is that it's potentially more admin work. So depending on how your admin system is, what platform you're using, if you're using MindBody or GlowFox or any of the others, this could potentially be more difficult for you because if you have to do any manual transactions and things of that nature, it could add up and stack up very quickly, as opposed to it being a little easier to identify perhaps credit card problems or less issues arising less frequently. Right. So the issues will arise more frequently on 7 days, which could also be looked at as a pro. If somebody's credit card declines, you'll know within a week and you can adjust that and fix it really quickly. Okay. So that's one of the potential downsides. The next one, that's probably the largest downside on this one, is that people will start potentially relating their attendance to their payments. And you might start having a few conversations of well, I missed last week, so can I just skip that payment? That's another conversation we can help you navigate, but that could be a potential downside of the every 7 days. Candidly, we haven't experienced that too much in my gym. It happens, but not that often. Not enough to skew us towards 28 days. So let's look at 28 days. So why every 28 days? Again, it's easy to sell. You're going to package it exactly the same way. Yeah, it's just $40 a week when we charge every 28 days, or we bill every 28 days. It's less admin work because you've got one payment happening every 28 days as opposed to frequent, more common payments. And again, depending on your payment processor, again, these are the little minute details that based on your payment processor, your back-end system, everything that you're operating within your gym, you'll have to make a decision of which of these lanes to steer towards. Okay, you're not going to have really any relationship between the attendance and the payments, so that's nice. That's a positive. And then the last sort of thumbs down or potential con is that you will now be experiencing slightly higher actual payment. So the dollar figure that everybody's going to get hit with on a monthly basis is just going to be a little bit higher. So now on the other side, on the every 7 days, it's lower, but every single week, you're going to have a member getting charged their credit card, which again is not so bad because it's a smaller, more digestible amount. Okay. Just for some context here, we can look at what these numbers look like on the high end of things. The math is exactly the same. If you're charging $100 a week, and the breakdown, of course, then over 52 weeks, you're going to have $5,200. Every 14 days, you're going to have $200 per 14 days, 26 cycles, $5,200. And last but not least, 28 days, it's a $400 per 4 weeks, 13 billing cycles at $5,200. Okay. So that's going to be a pretty good synopsis of all of your pricing and the best ways for you to actually structure that pricing going forward. So my biggest recommendations for you right now are figure out, let's stop looking at what's happening around us. Let's stop rubbernecking. It got really dark in here. Let's stop rubbernecking and looking around at all of the things that are happening around us. Let's focus on our own business and let's prioritize that. And let's look at where do we want to fall? We want to typically fall higher in that range between 39 to 69. If you're not sure where to fall, go higher. Push yourself a little higher. You don't have to go right to 69, but maybe go 49. Start there. And then if you start closing people at 70% or higher consistently, it's time to move those prices up because you can do it. And I promise you, once you do, you are not going to close fewer people and the sales are not going to be harder. Trust me. I've done this myself. Numbers, numerous times. So charge more, be confident in your pricing. Okay. Stick with that number, be confident in it. You're worth it. Okay. And then decide, are you going to bill every 7 days, every 14 days, or every 28 days? Pick one of those because monthly is gone. And are people going to say, oh, you don't charge monthly? Exactly. We do every 7 days or 14 or 20, whatever you choose. And that's okay. It's okay that people are going to ask you those questions. So stop looking around because we don't want to follow what broke people are doing. Pick your new pricing. And last but not least, pick your billing cycle. All right. Thank you guys for hopping onto this call, hopping onto this stream, this podcast, however you are consuming this content. All of the best visuals and everything are inside of the group. So you're going to get the most in depth. We can speak live. You can ask your questions, fire away. We will be back again next week. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for tuning in and have an amazing rest of your night and rest of your week. See you guys next week.